Hey there, welcome back. My name is Eric, and thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be making Italian Genoa Salami. This is probably one of my favorite salamis. You can almost find this at any grocery store, so it's quite popular, but it's also incredibly easy to make. And so through the process of this video, I'm going to share with you every single step along the way of the process of making salami. So if you're interested in charcuterie, and the thought of using starter cultures and molds and nitrates and nitrites is kind of overwhelming, be sure to stick around because I'm going to try to simplify it for you and hopefully you'll feel a little more comfortable. But if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing and clicking that notification bell. And if you have any questions along the way, then by all means, leave them in the comment section below. So what you're watching me do here is clean up my beef and my pork. And the way that I normally process salami is I get actual back fat from my butcher. So I have pure back fat, and that's going to satisfy the fat portion of my recipe. And then I take the muscles that I'm using here, which is the pernil, and I clean it up as much as I can. I get rid of any arteries, any silver skin, and what I'm left with is just pure lean meat. And I do the same thing with the beef. I trim everything off and I'm left with just pure lean beef. And then once I do that, I'm going to pop it in the freezer so that it can start chilling while I sanitize and clean my equipment. In this case, I'm going to be using an LEM number 22 Big Bite. Link below if you're looking for a heavy duty machine. And I just got my hands on something called iodophor because as I've been fermenting, different things to make wine and so on and so forth, iodophor is an exceptional sanitizer. And all you got to do is spray your equipment down, let it sit for 2 minutes, and any unwanted bacteria is killed off. It's an iodine-based cleaner, basically. And so that's what we're doing here. We're just cleaning off all of our equipment. Everything's been sprayed. I'm just going to let it sit for 2 minutes, and then I'm going to go ahead and chill that as well. So I'm going to pop that in the freezer. Notice I'm using 2 different size plates. For the beef, I'm going to go small, and then for the pork and the fat, I'm going to go a little bit larger. And so as I kind of speed through this, I don't want this video to be too epic. That was my beef. And so I've finished grinding that, and then now I'm going to go ahead and grind my pork. And if you see in the background, you can see the fat. I'm grinding it with the pork so that it's all being ground at the exact same time. Once all that's been ground, I'm going to put it back in the freezer because I want that to stay below 40 degrees. Ideally, 35, 36 degrees is perfect. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just measuring out the seasonings, the different spices that we're going to be using for this particular salami. And as you can see, I'm using a Mettler Toledo scale. This thing's incredibly accurate. A little pricey, but you can't go wrong. So if you're going to use a scale, definitely use one that measures in grams. And then try to get one that at least gets to the 10th of a gram so that you can be precise. Because when you're dealing with things like sodium nitrate, sodium nitrite, even starter cultures, your percentages are usually really low, and you need something that measures fairly small quantities. What I'm adding right here is dextrose, and this particular ingredient is specifically food for your starter culture. We want to give our starter culture the right kind of food so that it can produce lactic acid, reducing the pH, giving us all those wonderful benefits, and making our salami safe to eat. And so what we're going to do, we'll talk more about that in a minute. What we're adding now is our starter culture, and this is generally where people get the most confused. There's so many different varieties of starter culture. For this recipe, I'm going to be using a starter culture called BLC 007, and this particular starter culture allows me to achieve my target pH pretty quick, which is what I'm looking for. And you know what? If you want me to make another video specifically about the different starter cultures, the pHs, and the different flavors and profiles, give me a thumbs up and leave me a comment in the comment section below. Otherwise, we'll just keep going. So what I'm doing is I'm adding 2 tablespoons of water for every 5 pounds of meat. So I'm doing roughly about 45 pounds of meat. I'm going to do a cup of water with the starter culture. And I'm using the percentage that I have listed below in the recipe. And like I said, I'm looking for a more traditional European salami. It's not going to be tangy. It's going to be very flavorful, a lot of odor, beautiful color. And that's what this particular starter culture is going to give me. This, what I'm doing is I'm actually mixing the mold spores that give me that white outer surface coating that you typically see in European salamis. That's called Penicillium nalgiavensis. It's bought on the market as Mold 600. And I'm just putting roughly about a gram inside a little bit of water, and I'm adding a drop of dextrose, kind of like you're feeding goldfish. And I find that that helps that mold really get active, and we get a lot of flora activity very quickly when I do that. So now it's time to pick the right casing. Now, you can really pick whatever casing you want. The smaller your casing, the faster your salami is going to be ready. Obviously, the larger your casing, the longer it's going to take. This is a 3-inch casing. It's a 76 millimeter. And I've noticed that the 76 millimeter can generally take about 4.5 pounds of mince. And so I like this size. Generally, after it dries, my end product is roughly about 2.25 inches. And I'm fine with that. So what I'm doing is I'm taking these synthetic casings, and there's a link below. There's a link below for everything if you want to know where I got the stuff. This came from the sausage maker, and basically what I'm doing is I'm just tying a bit of a knot in which the knot is folded over right at the very tip, so that when there's weight on this particular salami, it's not just hanging from one string, it's actually hanging from 2 points. The bottom, I'm going to do the exact same thing, and that's so that the salami mince doesn't come flying out the bottom. Sometimes that stuff gets a little slippery. And there you go. That's what that's going to look like. And then I secure it with a double knot and then put it in some lukewarm water so that that can hydrate for roughly about 30 minutes. And in about 30 minutes, that stuff's going to be ready. The reason I like this particular casing so much is because it adheres to the meat incredibly well. It's super durable. You don't have to worry about this thing busting. And although it will rip, you've got to be acting completely nuts for it to rip. And so I've just put a double knot at the very end of that butcher's twine, and that double knot is going to serve as the spot where I put my hook so that I can hang it inside my chamber. And that's what that's going to look like. All right, so that's going to soak for roughly 30 minutes, like we said a minute ago. And now we're going to go ahead and mix up our meat. So there's my beef, there's my pork fat, and all that's been in the freezer. It's roughly at about 36 degrees right now. And we're just going to go ahead and mix it. So I've got an LEM sausage mixer. This thing will fit up to about 50 pounds. And I am simply adding all the seasonings. The culture has been hydrating for roughly about 30 minutes as well. And you don't want to let it hydrate for a whole lot longer than that, anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes to go ahead and use it. And that's the starter culture. And so right now what I'm going to do is just intermittently sprinkle some into my mixture. And that's going to help it get a little bit better incorporated. And if you don't have an LEM meat mixer, you can use a stand mixer like a KitchenAid. Those work great. We have a couple different size stand mixers, and so different videos you might see me using different versions of stand mixers, but I actually like the way the stand mixers work. And what you're going to notice is as you mix it, you're going to see a distinctive texture change. So I'm going to slow it down for you so you can see it starts to get fuzzy, if that if that makes any sense. And as you mix it, you're going to start to notice that the individual strands of ground beef and ground pork are going to harmoniously come together, and it's going to become very, very sticky. If you reach in and grab a little handful and it sticks to your hand, then there's a fairly good chance that it's done. In that mixer, that process normally takes about 8 to 10 minutes. In a stand mixer on a medium speed, that may take about 5 to 6 minutes. So you just have to watch it and kind of get a feel for what you're looking for. I'm using a sausage maker 25-pound sausage stuffer. And when you make salami, you are going to have something in order to stuff your casings with. And you can use a KitchenAid. You could use, your grinder with the stuffing attachment. The thing you don't want to do is you don't want to heat up your salami meat. You don't want to heat up that mince. So however you're doing it, make sure your meat is cold and work very quickly. What I'm doing here is I'm putting a lot of pressure with my right hand, and I'm letting that mince basically fill in that casing as tight as I can. And look what happened. I broke my piston with this particular meat because I wasn't paying attention, and I had peppercorn inside my chamber. And when this thing dropped all the way to the very bottom, I ended up cracking some of that peppercorn. I wasn't paying attention, and it ended up splitting that piston all down the center. So I ended up rigging it with some saran wrap, some cling film to get through this particular meat, but I've already called the sausage maker and I've got another one on order. So Thanks a lot, sausage maker. I'm going to go ahead and finish this process up to show you, but once again, a lot of pressure with my right hand. I'm basically holding the tube, the funnel, and I'm forcing that mince. So I don't want any air pockets. I want this to be as tight as I can possibly get it. And because it's a synthetic casing of this quality, I don't really have to worry about it busting. And so once I have it as tight as I can get it, I'm going to go ahead and move it over into the area that I'm working with. And that is the end result. I'm going to end up with about 10 of those. Now, once you're completely done stuffing all of your casings, you're going to have a little bit of mince left over. Don't throw it away, because what we're going to do is we're going to wrap that in some cling film, and I'll tell you how we're going to use that here in a second. So right now I'm just going to set that to the side, and I'm going to proceed with wrapping up the rest of my salami. I've tied up all the bottoms of the salamis just like I did with the top, so that the mince doesn't come pouring out, and now I've prepared my tags, which means we have to weigh it. What we want is what they call a green weight. That's the starting weight of your salami. Notice I'm roughly at about 4.5 pounds. I put A for actual and T for target. That's what I want to end up with. So for me, I'm looking at a 40% weight loss. But for you, you can go anywhere between 30 to whatever. It doesn't really matter. A lot of people like 30. A lot of people like 35. I like mine a little harder, a little drier. And so I shoot for 40. And we find that to be a pleasant salami eating experience. Right now, I'm going to poke my entire salami and make sure there's no air pockets. And then I'm going to brush it with that Penicillium nalgiavensis. This is that mold 600s that we prepared earlier. And I like doing it in a tin because anything that's slopped over onto the tin, the next salami is going to get it. The next salami is going to get it. And by the time it's all done with, these things are going to be super coated. Now it's time to ferment our salami. Now this is what makes salami making a little different than salumi making. We actually have to ferment the salami. Remember, we added a starter culture, and now what we need to do is we need to put those salamis in an environment that the starter culture can thrive in. So depending on what culture you use will determine what environment you put it in. Some operate at higher temperatures, some operate at lower temperatures. And so what I've done is I've made a refrigerator in which I can control the temperature and the humidity, and that's what those probes were. And all I'm doing is I'm controlling the environment so that the starter culture can thrive. I'm looking at roughly about 86% humidity and anywhere between 65 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit. This is going to be the perfect environment for this culture to really produce the right amount of lactic acid, giving me all the benefits, all the protection against listeria, the color, the odor flake, all of this stuff is going to be happening inside this fridge. And now we're going to put that mince in there. See that? And that mince is going to be what we use to test the pH. Now, the controllers that I'm using, these are relatively inexpensive, cheap controllers. The one on the left controls the humidity. Basically, I'm looking at 86% humidity, and as soon as I touch 86, that light should turn off, and that kills the humidifier. The one on the right, that controls the refrigerator. So I've got it set at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and when it starts to rise above 68, the refrigerator cuts on until it gets to the parameters that I set it, and then the refrigerator cuts off, and so it keeps it within a 3-degree value generally, and that's how I have that set. With these values, I know that it generally takes anywhere between 30 to 36 hours for that salami to get to the right pH. But along the way, I test it. And so here's a couple things that you want to do. Test your meat before you begin. That way you kind of know where you're at. We probably should do an entire video of pH and meats and ranges and so on and so forth, and the effect that higher and lower pH has on salami. But at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is 5.1 to 5.3. And as you can see right here, I'm at 5.18. And this is after 36 hours. And so that's exactly what I'm looking for. This is the perfect range, and I've put it in my chamber, and this is about 24 hours after it's in the chamber. Notice the color difference between the before and after. That culture is going to really enhance the color, as is the sodium nitrate that you add. The parameters inside my chamber is 53 to 55, and then I try to keep it between 83 and 85% humidity at the very beginning. After about the first week, I'll drop it down to 80% humidity, and I'll leave it like that for about 2 months. And that's how you make Italian Genoa salami. I hope you liked this video. If you have any questions, which I'm sure you do, leave them in the comment section below. I read every comment and respond to every question. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new. click that notification bell, and share this. If you want me to make a video on nitrates and nitrites as well as starter cultures, also let me know because we're wide open. Thanks a lot. We'll see you in the next video.